Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Way the World Works, a Tuttle Twins podcast. So today, I want to talk about a period of time in American history that I think is really interesting and kind of overlooked, but we're hearing about it a lot right now because for any grown-ups out there, there's a show called The Gilded Age that is about the Gilded Age, which is what we're going to talk about, which is a period of time between about 1870 and 1900. And the show's pretty big right now, and it's kind of like Downton Abbey for the adults who like that. It's a period drama with fun characters and fun costumes. And so I've been thinking a lot about it because I was watching it. This is adult show, not for kids, but we were I was thinking about it because there's something so interesting about this period of time, and I want to talk about that. So this is during the time of the Second Industrial Revolution. And so think of this as like steel, oil, trains, mass manufacturing, and so finance. So banks are getting big. And so you're having this period of time where even though the American dream, this concept has been around for a while because America was very entrepreneurial even from day one, this is like a radicalization of the American dream because these new means of getting money, this industrial revolution is making people rich very, very quickly. And so it's not even that like they're slowly picking themselves up by the bootstraps and starting a business and, you know, maybe they were poor and paying off their debt so that they could give their kids a better life. This is a little different because this is like one person who maybe didn't have a lot of money makes a really good investment in oil, and then all of a sudden they are the equivalent to millionaire billionaires today. So this isn't just the American dream of building a great life from nothing. This is going from 0 to 100 and being one of the top wealthy elites. They called this the nouveau riche. And what that means is like new money. And that wasn't, I mean, I like money, whether it's new or old, but nouveau riche was actually like a derogatory, it was a mean term because there were a lot of old established, especially in New York society, old established money. And the South too had a lot of this old money. And now you had like these people who weren't brought up to know all these manners and going to the right, they called them like etiquette schools or finishing schools and colleges. They didn't have these rich mannerisms, and instead they had just made some good investments, and now they were expecting to be invited to the same parties as these people. And they thought like, well, you're not old money, you're new money, you're the nouveau riche. But you're going to see this explode during this time because, again, there's so many more ways to make money, and people are doing that, which, great. We love a good entrepreneur story, right? But it's going to fracture society, and this is also going to usher in a new wave of, does it matter where your money came from? Does it matter? And in a lot of ways, I think it's going to swing in favor of the nouveau riche because everybody loves a good story. I have nothing against inheriting wealth from your grandfathers or fathers or mothers, or, I have no problem with that. I wish that it happened to me. But there's something great about somebody who was born with nothing, who finally gets a break, right? We love an underdog. We love a good hero. And so the Gilded Age is going to give us so many of those, and it's really going to show us what entrepreneurship can do. Now, one reason I mentioned the Second Industrial Revolution, but another reason that all these businesses are going to be started and all these entrepreneurs are going to be successful is because there wasn't a ton of regulation on the market, of government regulation on the market. And so that's really interesting too, because something that I'm sure our listeners know is that when the market doesn't have a lot of restrictions and people are free to build their businesses without having to, follow all these really strict and often unnecessary government hurdles and burdens, the market flourishes, people flourishes. It's a win-win. Everybody gets to benefit from this. Now, that's not to say that this is not without bad things happening. Bad things happen literally everywhere. And so you're going to get some instances, and I'm not going to get too much into this today, but you're going to get a really famous Supreme Court cases actually called the slaughterhouse cases, which sounds like a weird name, but it's exactly what it sounds like. It was about a slaughterhouse that was up the river, upstream from New Orleans. And then you're going to have like runoff, which means like the animals you're butchering, the blood, the guts, it's going to go down the river, and people are going to be really worried because people are dying of cholera, which you get from contaminated drinking water. These things are terrible, But the government uses this to come in and say, we need to regulate businesses. You don't have a right to economic freedom. And so you're going to get into this like, oh, well, we need government regulations. Who's going to save us without government regulations? But people aren't going to realize that the market does have a feedback system, that the free market could have and would have, I think, made the right changes over time. But people be loving that government regulation. So that was a little bit of a side tangent. We'll get back into just where I'm going with this now. But so I wanted to point this out to just be that this was a time when there are fewer regulations, more people are allowed to rise up and overcome their circumstances to become wealthy and create value. And it's such a good thing. And I want to talk about one of those people today who is a product of the Gilded Era. And that is, I want to back up real quick. Gilded, when you think of gilded, I want you to think of like gold, of like this kind of showy wealth. And another way to think about that is that the nouveau riche were kind of looked down at for being very showy, because for the first time they had the money to buy these fancy dresses and they were a little bit outlandish. But so gilded, everything was like, everything wasn't really paved in gold, but it was a very showy and kind of a gaudy is another word to say it, kind of a theme going on. But okay, so I want to talk about somebody, a great entrepreneur who came out of the Gilded Age. John D. Rockefeller. This is a name you've probably heard. If you think of like Rockefeller Center, you're familiar with that term. And he was an entrepreneur who was born into very little. And he became an oil man, and Standard Oil, that's something you've probably heard of, or at least your parents have. It's going to be one of the most successful companies ever. And so it's a really big deal that this is started not by someone who inherited generational wealth, which, again, I have to say, I don't mind. I think if you want to be rich and you inherited wealth, more power to you. I wish it was me. But I do also want to point out, so we're going to talk about John Rockefeller, and he is in the Tuttle Twins Guide to Inspiring Entrepreneurs. A really great book. It's not just him in here. There's a bunch of others that changed the world and changed their own circumstances. Okay, so let's get into it. So Rockefeller is born into a pretty poor family, and his father is what they called like a snake oil salesman. Did he actually sell snake oil? No. But what that means is it was this term that was used of like salesmen who would go town to town, like peddling their tonics, like selling like tonics that usually didn't work. They were kind of like con men. Think of it, I don't even know if kids today know about infomercials, because we were watching more TV and less streaming back in the 80s and 90s when I grew up. So, but there would always be these infomercials of like, look at this laundry detergent is going to clean like no other laundry detergent can. It's basically magic. And that's kind of what a traveling salesman, snake oil salesman were. So his dad was gone a lot, and his mother had to, she was basically a single mom. And so he ended up raising his siblings, and even had to, sacrifice his own schooling to do so. His mother, though, was a very, very big influence in his life. And she taught him, and I've mentioned this before in other episodes, the most important lesson I think any person can learn. And that is when you learn to control yourself, when you learn to control your own emotions and train yourself to use logic, you have control over everything. That is the greatest superpower in the world, when you learn to control your own emotions. And I want to read what his mother said. So his mother taught him that self-control wins the battle, for it means control of others. Now, does that mean that she wanted him to control other people? No, but basically what she was saying is when you control yourself, you have an influence on other people. People are going to react to how you're acting. And if you're calm and if you're collected, they're going to respond to that. So I think that's a really, really powerful lesson. And she also told him the importance of charity, of giving back when you can. And that was going to be very important to him also. So one thing to know about Rockefeller is that he didn't do well in school. He was not this great student. And, I think one of his teachers remarked that he was untalented and kind of slow. And that's just because he wasn't really into what they were teaching. And he had other things going on. He had to help provide for his family. He had to look for jobs and things like that. But he was never known for being lazy. He was like a hustler. He worked hard, and that was going to come in handy. So I think it was around when he was in his teen years, he drops out of school and he takes a business course. because he's like, you know what, I'm going to learn money. I'm going to learn banking. I'm going to learn about bookkeeping, like accounting. And he does that. And by 16, he's able to graduate and get into the workforce, which is good. And I wrote down this little quote, too, that I want to read that he used to say, and I think he got this from his mother as well, and that is, success comes from keeping the ears open and the mouth closed. And why I want to bring this up is to get into the next point of why people liked him so much. When we think of entrepreneurs and, you know, big like Wall Street bankers today, I think we think of kind of loud and never short of having an opinion, right? They're very kind of boisterous people, excuse me. And so in this circumstance, he was of the mindset that success came from not being the loudest person in the room, the person who had the most to say in a meeting, but to listening to what people are going to say. And that ties in very closely to what he said about controlling emotions too, because all of that goes hand in hand. If you're reacting to someone saying something, or not even reacting, just speaking, you're not going to have time to take it in and sit with that. So the self-control in this man was just incredible. So when the oil boom starts happening, Rockefeller has an entry into this world, and he seizes it, even though there was a lot of issues with oil at the time, but he had a really smart plan. I'm actually going to read a short passage from the book. And that's, even with all the red flags coming from the oil market, Rockefeller saw opportunity. His first goal was to cut wastefulness. Where others would throw out excess from the oil making process, Rockefeller went looking for uses, which I think is great, right? So he sold the gasoline that was produced as fuel, while others dumped it in rivers. He found use for the tar by selling it for paving, and his team discovered the oil byproducts for lubricants, oil, and candles. While others were throwing away these products, John was profiteering. And that is like the sign of, I think, a really good entrepreneur. And this is like a silly analogy, but I always think of it because I'm a big bread maker. I make sourdough. And every time you have to feed sourdough, it's like a plant. And every time you feed it, you have to throw half of it away. And a lot of people just throw it down the drain, but you can actually take that discard and you can make other things with it. You can make like, not things that'll rise as much as bread, but you can make like pizza dough, and like there's fun little recipes. And that always makes me think of Rockefeller with the oil. Not as much money in sourdough, unfortunately, but where he didn't want to waste it. He wanted to take it and use it. He wanted to find all these uses, and it paid off for him because he ends up being this huge giant of the entrepreneurial world at the time. But when we look at him and we think what made him so successful, I think there's a few things we can touch on, which one was that he had his emotions, and his emotions in control, and his logic, was pretty airtight. And then people knew him as a man who kept his ego in check. He never got inflated and thought he was better than everyone. And part of that was that he always stayed in touch with his roots. So back in this day, like, if you were making more money, sometimes you would get invited to go to like the high class churches, like same religion, maybe like it would still be, a Christian religion, but it would be like a fancier church that you had to like be invited to. And he didn't buy that. He's like, no, I'm going to go to the same community church that I grew up in because these people have always been there for me. I'm going to give back. I think his mother is who taught him, get money, give money, I think was the line she taught him. So giving to good causes, giving to charity, remembering the lessons his mother taught him, that was very influential on him. And also he believed, like, for him, keeping, God close to his heart, his religion was so important to him. His community was so important to him, and this grounded him. So when he made this, amazing, obscene amount of money. I say obscene, that's like the term. But again, I hate connecting negativity with being rich, because as a lover of free market capitalism, I believe you can be rich and that's not a bad thing. There are people who get rich in bad ways. A lot of them are politicians, actually, which is a little different. But nothing wrong with using entrepreneurship to build your own fortune. So John D. Rockefeller was an incredible entrepreneur, and he was a product of this Gilded Age, this time when you could create and make money without all these regulations that hold back entrepreneurs today. And so again, please pick up this book. And again, I think the Gilded Age, Gilded Era is a really fun time in American history. And, I'm such a revolutionary colonial American history buff that I focus on that so much of the time that when I get this new excitement over a new era. I think like, oh, there's a new piece of history that just further adds to all the things we believe in, individualism, the power of the marketplace. And I think that the Gilded Era, Gilded Age, both are used, I think it's a perfect example. So we will leave it there. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast, share with your friends. And until next time, I will talk to you later.